Ben Reeves, you are the only person at this table, the only person outside of Capcom, as far as we know, that's ever played Mega Man 11.
That's right, with these thumbs.
Those thumbs.
I played them.
What did you think of Mega Man 11 in general? What was the big takeaway after that trip?
I liked it.
It's
a good game. It feels a lot like Mega Man of yore, let's say, the old classic Mega Man. It's a new look, obviously. If you've been online, you've probably seen the screens. It's fun, and especially, like, it's been 7 years since we've had a new Mega Man game.
Yeah.
And even longer than that, since we've had, like, a new Mega Man game that kind of, like, takes the art in a new direction, takes the art forward. It's really been since, like, the PlayStation.
That's interesting to think about. Yeah,
it's interesting to think about. So it's been a long time since we've had a Mega Man game that looks new.
Yeah.
And I think this one looks good in motion. Like, there's some people who debated against our screens, right?
I spent an uncomfortable amount of time on that trip thinking about, like, oh, with Capcom, some of their fighting games lately, Street Fighter V had some debate, MVCI had some debate. And so I spent so much of that trip just staring at the screen while you were playing, thinking, like, are fans going to be pissed about this art style? Like, it seems fine to me.
Yeah.
And I think in stills maybe doesn't come across as well, but seeing it in motion, it seems like it's convinced more people, and by and large, people are okay with it, as far as I can tell.
I think it looks good. I think it's hard because you compare it to something like Dragon Ball Z, which is a recent game that we just had our cover, which is an amazing looking game. That
one
looks
of the best
like,
looking games ever.
Yeah.
Like, you can't top it.
It looks exactly like an animated show, which is cool, and I wish they'd maybe pushed in that direction. But for what it is, it looks great. And they commented too on just like when you up the visuals, it makes it harder to like make the controls feel tight. That was there.
Prioritizing animation is the big issue. Yeah.
If animation's more involved, then making sure that the controls feel like a classic 8-bit Mega Man game is harder.
Well, how did it feel?
And it felt good. It felt like kind of like what I said, like an old school Mega Man game. It feels just as tight as at least I remembered. And you did not play it, but it's also very hard.
Oh my God. This was another big takeaway. It was a very bizarre situation where it's like, all right, first person outside of Capcom to ever play Mega Man 11. We're handing you the controller, Ben Reeves. You're going to want to press B to get started there. And he's like, and then repeatedly kept pressing the wrong button. It's like a very stressful situation.
That's not. I was pressing the button they told me.
Okay.
There was a debug thing going on. I'm just saying.
But
you're painting me in a bad picture.
No. But then Reeves did an amazing job, and he played through 2 stages, including like beating the Robot Masters at the end.
Right.
But it felt like a long, old school gaming session where it was myself and Reeves, Tim Turry, former Game Informer editor, working at Capcom, working on this game. He was there, other Capcom PR, and then also the 2 lead developers, like the producer and the director, all just watching Ben Reeves just beat his head against a wall trying to beat these 2 really hard stages.
It was one of the most intense moments I remember of a cover story I've been on, just because having the director and the producer right there watching you play, and if you die more than like twice on any sequence, you're like, oh gosh, am I going to do this? Am I going to be able to overcome this? And then hearing them talk in Japanese to like the translator and not knowing what they're saying, and then
I spoke Japanese a little. I didn't
really?
tell you. They were saying, "Is something wrong with him? What's wrong with this oath?"
At some point, you died, and
he
they
has
just said,
cognitive
"I told you."
problems. Right?
Does he know which button shoots?
Yeah.
But then Tim was like, "Oh no, he's really good at games. He's always very like he's committed. He'll overcome." Because me and Tim played Donkey Kong Country Returns together, and that was a similar situation. The game is hard, and eventually we overcome. So Tim's talking about that while I'm trying to overcome this thing. I was like, I just need to beat this thing, and then I would beat it and be like, oh, thank you.
It was hard,
and it's important to note too, like Mega Man that series has a reputation for just being. I mean, it's no like, what's the way to say it? Like,
no walk in the park.
You need. Like that is a trial and error sort of series,
right?
Like in general, you're not supposed to like select a level, get through the whole thing, and beat the Robot Master in one run. It's
14 minutes. All right, next game. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, it takes. I remember having that experience when I was younger. I had Mega Man 2 like just straight up memorized, I picked that up again when the
Legacy Collection.
Yeah. Did they have one of those on the? I think that was on the NES Classic too, maybe.
Mega Man 2, I think so.
I think that's where I was playing it, because then I hopped in and just realized that like though I could still remember some of it, it was like there was definitely a relearning process that had to happen for that.
And this is not Mega Man 2. This is all new. But if you're scared of like, oh, I don't want it to be too difficult, the interesting thing with Mega Man 11 is they actually have 4 difficulty options.
Right. And so we were playing on normal, which is the 3rd difficulty.
What?
And they say that's like Yeah, it's kind of weird that they have 2 easy modes.
Well, they have newcomer, casual, normal, and superhero.
Yeah.
As the 4.
But normal is like a traditional Mega Man game, which is, I would say, harder than most normal games today, let's say.
Oh, yeah.
And then superhero mode is even going to be harder. So if you want
Right.
a challenge, you're going to have a challenge. But then if you want an easier time, we didn't get to play the 2 easy modes, but they're presumably a lot easier. They did say that they'll add new platforms, like shorter like checkpoints, stuff like that.
Yeah, they're
going to
change.
easier.
So like on normal, a
Oh.
level, a stage will have like 2 to 3 checkpoints. It said newcomer mode, checkpoints numbers will bump up, and also like you'll get like support items to like alleviate knockback and like little things like that.
Yeah.
Which will be nice.
Did Mega Man like 9 and 10 have those?
I think
features?
I know 10 had it, but I'm not sure about
10
9.
had a easy mode,
Yeah.
if I'm right. It didn't have. I think it just had the 2 though, right?
Yeah, I think it
Easy
just had
and
a
then
thing.
normal.
I know it. I remember hearing about a mode with extra platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just
And then
remember
Mega Man
people-
Powered Up also had that.
Oh yeah, Powered Up was great.
All right, Joe, you're in charge of making Mega Man 11.
Yeah.
What do you
okay.
do? You know, like that's the task these developers had, and it is a tough one. Like you could go a number of different directions. Which direction would you go, and would you want them to go?
Okay, well, so it's funny that Mega Man Powered Up just came up because I think that is probably like one of my favorite Mega Man games ever.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, like, there's a lot of nostalgia for me wrapped up in like Mega Man, 1, 2, 3.
Mhm.
But in terms of just like the play experience, I think what makes Powered Up and Maverick Hunter X interesting is that they add new wrinkles to just the basic like play a stage, fight the robot master formula,
Yeah.
which I think that's kind of what for Mega Man kind of what led to its downfall isn't the right word, but sort of like fading over the years probably was like people just kind of know what to expect exactly from a Mega Man game. And I like those because like they change the formula a bit. So I guess what I'm saying, if I'm in charge,
Yes.
I'm not saying make all these sort of like different playable characters. I don't know all the answers to it, but for me, I think it's find a way to change up that formula so it's like not as predictable and to give players like surprising and interesting moments beyond just the like Mega Man 1, 2, 3 like template.
Totally. And I feel like with 9 and 10, they were as classic and retro as possible.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so it's like,
Yeah.
even though it's been so long, I would imagine fans still want things to shake up. And Mega Man 11, we can't talk about a certain feature / mechanic in the game, but it does change things up more than any other feature or mechanic throughout mainline
Yeah.
Mega Man, Reeves. Is that how
Yeah,
you
I'd
put
say
it?
that it changes things up more than any other Mega Man game. And we did get to play with it, and I like it, and it was helpful.
Also,
It
it's
does-
completely optional. So if you want a classic experience, you
Yeah,
can totally have
You
that.
could not have it. You
Yeah.
could totally use it, and it's beneficial, and it changes the moment-to-moment gameplay. That's about all we can say about it. We'll
Yes.
obviously share more when they like release that embargo, but it's cool.
But
It's a cool new feature.
It does. I mean, beyond sort of like the new feature, it does have some stuff from later Mega Man games, right? You can slide. for
Yes.
example.
Yeah, you can slide. You can charge up your beam.
Okay.
One cool thing that is new is there's like I called it an invisible weapon wheel, if you know what I mean. Like you have the right analog stick and you can switch
Mm.
the weapon you want with the analog
Okay.
stick, but there's no like it's like Ratchet and
doesn't
Clank
appear
in
on the
that you can
screen,
pick
right?
it, but
Okay.
there's no visible weapon wheel.
Okay.
If that
Yeah.
makes sense. So
It
it's
just-
like upper right would switch over to a certain robot master, down
Yeah,
left
yeah.
would switch over to a different one.
Oh,
So it's
yeah,
much
yeah.
quicker. Yeah, it's a good choice. And also just simple stuff like they emphasize, like, oh, it's not just a palette swap for Mega Man. Once he absorbs Robot Master's powers,
Right.
it actually is like a full transformation. You can see a good example in like that blue look, the different teal look, I guess, for Mega Man that's in our site in the cover story and overall online for the videos they've released to kind of get a rough feel of
Yeah.
what he could look like and just imagine that times all the different Robot Masters.
Yeah, cool.
Also, just real quick, simple, quick stuff. Like after you defeat a robot master, it goes to like this blueprint screen, and then you get a little tutorial on the new weapon and stuff, which is nice.
Yeah, so you can mess around with the weapon more than they've done that sometimes in the past, but like it feels like you have more opportunity to mess around with this and use it with the new mechanic and use it by charging up your shot and like see what it does. Every weapon has a different effect when you charge it up.
So I
versus
guess-
just the basic shot.
My question there is like, to what degree do you need a tutorial with Mega Man weapons? Because like previously, it's just been like, you got this weapon, whoop whoop whoop, and you see it. It's like, oh, that's what this weapon looks
Fires
like.
a saw blade.
Yeah, I mean, like, do they perform differently enough? Are they mechanically different enough to like need some time to like get comfortable with it?
I mean, it's just nice. It's the one that they did show off was with the like brick things that you
Mhm.
can see in the trailer that appear from the sky and fall down. like that's a little bit different than just the thing that shoots out in front of you.
Yeah.
So that's the thing where you can like drop from the sky, and there isn't the other robot master weapon we played with functioned differently as well than a normal just shoot thing. So they're maybe a little bit different than normal. It's not like game changing, but it is nice to be like, there were times when I used those powers and it was way easier to get through certain sequences in a level using that power. And it's like they thought through like how are players going to use these weapons in the stages, and how might that make your job easier as a player.
So some of them can function as more than just different kinds of ammo.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, at least out of the two we saw, definitely.
So I was always afraid in some of those earlier Mega Man games to ever use any of my special weapons because like I'd never know what I'd need for the boss fight once I got there.
Yeah, and that's how I've always played too. I don't know, it might be one of those things where maybe you have to let that go a little bit, because it is very much in your benefit to use those Robot Masters outside of Robot Master battles.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's just like reprogramming your brain a little bit. But yeah, I would say mess around with it because it's fun.
But it's the same general mechanic as before, where it's like if you use it in the level, you have like an energy bar that depletes, and as you kill enemies, they drop stuff that maybe fills it up a little. It's that same sort of approach.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
And there are E-tanks, so I assume there might be tanks for your weapons as well. They didn't explicitly say that, but that's kind of an assumption on my part.
Yeah. And with the Robot Masters in general, they said they wanted to kind of take it back, because it's like, oh, first couple Mega Man games, like it was pretty easy to figure out the kind of rock paper scissors layout of like, okay, I bet this weapon's strong against this. And then in a video interview we put up yesterday, they talked about like how eventually the series just got so weird, where it's like Centaur Man versus Night Man, like what defeats what, and so expect Mega Man 11 to kind of not repeat Robot Masters, but kind of go back to the roots, a little more primal. Some would say elemental aspect of like, okay, clearly I can understand this, and then this, then this, then this.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rockman will beat Paperman.
Yeah.
No way, it's the other way around.
What did you think about just the game's development, Reeves? What did you learn after spending so much time with those developers?
Yeah, good question. It was interesting to get some insight into like what was the vibe in the studio after Inafune left.
Yeah, they were surprisingly open. It was nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be so easy for a studio to kind of talk around even saying Inafune, but they're like, yeah, it's Inafune left. He had a lot of great ideas, and then it was just this weird vacancy, and it was kind of sad that we weren't doing anything with Mega Man.
Yeah, and they were open to saying like, you know, there were a couple of times we experimented with what can we do next with Mega Man. None of those projects really worked out, but this is the one that did work out, so we feel confident in this one. Which is kind of fun. It makes me want to know, like, okay, well, I'd love to see those tech demos of whatever the other Mega Man games that didn't work out were.
And it wasn't necessarily this team. Like, you never know. It seemed like it was like different people within the studio being like, I can make a new Mega Man, and then it gets a little ways and like, not so much. And then eventually the team that ends up making it is an internal team within Capcom, as far as we can tell. And so the director, Oda, and producer, Tsuchiya, Tsuchiya has worked on Mega Man before on like 5 and 7. Oda has been at Capcom since 1991.
Wow.
But he has never worked on Mega Man.
No.
And now he's the game director, and he's always said that he's had a lot of ideas about what he could do with the series, including what this new mechanic is. And so he's excited to kind of
It's bugging me that you can't talk about that. I want to know what it is.
I know. I'm sorry. I wish I could as well, Joe.
Yeah. One interesting thing, like talking to Oda, he's like a huge horror fan. He worked on the Resident Evil series.
Director of Resident Evil 0, stuff like that.
Yeah. And he like dropped casually in this conversation this like little tidbit that I was like, wait a minute, what? Like he was like, oh yeah, like back when we were working on the first Resident Evil, back when it was on the Super Nintendo, a little blah blah blah. I'm like, wait a minute, what? So I guess maybe it's out there and I didn't know, but I looked online and like nobody was talking about this. But
it was a good
Resident
sign.
Evil was originally on the Super Nintendo, which is kind of crazy.
They're starting to build it there, and it like took place in hell or a hellish place, as they put it. And it was still had like a working title, like horror game. But it was funny because he said that, and it's like, is this one of those well-known things that just I didn't know? And then I looked over at Tim, and I saw Tim lean over and whisper to somebody from Capcom, I didn't know this. Like, oh, okay, if Tim didn't know, then clearly this is something new. But that's the glory and the beauty of like talking so much to somebody that's been working at Capcom, the same place since 1991. I mean, like Ghouls and Ghosts level. It's just awesome to see like
26 years.
Yeah, old gray-haired Japanese developer. Like that guy has seen so much crazy stuff we cannot even imagine.
They try to embargo it. Like you can't talk about the fact that Resident Evil was developed for the SNES.
No, actually, we talked about making it the cover story.
Can we get those documents? Yeah, that would have been really cool. But he was cool to talk about, and just the fact that he's like huge horror nerd, and he developed the Strider game, the Strider reboot, like years back, if you remember that. But it's just like, he's been at Capcom for that long, and he's never touched a Mega Man. But he was so excited to like I finally get to work on Mega Man. For him, it was like, you know, the pinnacle of his career or something like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of what he said. Is like, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. It's like, I'm finally doing Mega Man. Like, it's interesting, like, inside the company that people have that much excitement or reverence for Mega Man still.
And even like it's fun to hear people, because a lot of people within Capcom, they've released a lot of Mega Man games over the years, have never touched the mainline series. So stuff like the artist, I forget his name now, I'm very sorry, but it's his first time working on a proper Mega Man game. He worked on like Battle Network. He did like enemy designs for Mega Man Legends and stuff.
Yeah.
We have a video going up with him later on in the month. Or the composer has only worked on the Star Force series. It's like, all right, stepping up, time to make a proper Mega Man. And so that has to be exciting.
Yeah. My favorite part of the interview with the artist was we were talking to him about his designs, and then he pulls out these 3 sheets that look like super old, like sketches.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, these are the 3 Mega Man bosses I submitted for the Mega Man boss battle entry like back in like 1994.
Oh yeah. I submitted tons of those too.
Oh, I
And
bet
so
they
it's
were
like-
awesome, Joe.
like,
It's
oh,
bunch
they-
of Homer Simpson, man.
Joe, man.
Yeah, I'd love to compare your drawings to his and see.
He did come up with Batman, which I think is pretty original.
Pretty good. Another one was Liquid Man, which I
Yeah.
actually kind of like.
Yeah, they're in the cover story if you want to
But then,
check 'em
like,
out
we're
there.
like, oh, this is awesome. What were you doing when you drew these? Like, oh, I was working at Capcom. Like, he's like, he was working at Capcom, but he secretly submitted these entries into the Mega Man Boss Challenge under like a pseudonym, just because he wanted to see.
I had to submit my idea for Batman in secret. No one could know.
Hey,
oh, go ahead, Joe.
So I know, I mean, well, a lot of developers are wary of sort of saying anything that could be misinterpreted or interpreted as sort of, you know, throwing shade at other developers, right?
Yeah.
Did anyone talk about Mighty Number 9 in any capacity while you guys were there?
The internet sure did when they announced Mega Man 11.
That's right.
I don't think the developers brought it up. They definitely said that they love the kind of renaissance that 2D platformers have had recently in their minds. Like, we love a good hard platformer. We love playing stuff, kind of like hinting towards Cuphead or something in that vein. But no, it did not come up.
Okay.
It's not like we have to make it wildly different from that game or anything like that. But I'm sure they think about it internally. If
Well,
No.
yeah, I mean, like you said, when this game is unveiled, when it's like, okay, 2D platformer, 3D style, art style in this, I mean, following a sort of familiar Mega Man formula, like I think it's hard to not sort of draw that parallel. And I was sort of wondering if they had any sort of like mentioned any sort of strategy to say like, look, we know people were disappointed with Mighty Number 9. We are trying to avoid that in these specific ways.
not that directly,
No.
but
Okay.
certainly that sentiment and general vibe.
Yeah, they did talk a lot about like, okay, do we take Mega Man in a new direction? Do we make it a 3D game? Do we, you know, one of the quotes is like, do we put glasses on him? Which I thought was amusing. Like, that's what you're
I've
thinking
always
about
wanted
doing,
to put
changing the
glasses
game?
on him.
Yeah.
But
Since 1991, I've dreamed
too
of
radical.
lowering glasses on the Mega Man's dumb face.
He's
He's been farsighted all this time and he just gets no
Finally.
He
correction.
keeps shooting his buddies.
It's
They're
why
other
you can't-
robots, dude.
It's why it's 2D side scrolls, because he can't see literally that far.
He has no
Finally.
depth perception.
Yeah.
4 Eyes Man. But they kept coming back to like, you know, that Mega Man formula, the original formula just works so well. We wanted to hold true to that. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
it's interesting that they, and back to that point, like comparing it to Mighty Number 9, just as a person who's played both, like this just feels so much better and like tighter, and the moment to moment gameplay just feels better. So I think they're nailing it in a way that Mighty Number 9 tried to do and failed.
Yeah.
Sure. One of the questions that I had was, I think there was a lot of reaction about the fact that it was 2.5D basically instead of 2D like Mega Man 8 was.
Yeah.
And one of the concerns there is that always like with those games, like readability is always kind of a thing of like, I'm not sure what's in the foreground, I'm not sure what's in the background. Did you get a sense like they had something like, did you ever get the sense like I can't distinguish between these two foreground background stuff, or is like, did you ever get that sense at all?
It airs on the side, from what I saw from Reeves playing, it airs on the side of shockingly simple backgrounds
Okay.
in time. So yeah, the artist even talked about that, like, oh, how busy do we make the background? And there are moments where it's like, oh, this is not like a black screen behind him, but it's like, oh, that's much simpler background than I would have expected. Like, the pyramid level and construction level. Construction level is a lot of darkness behind you. And then the pyramid level, it'll kind of have subtle stuff in the background, but never to the point of being overly distracting.
Yeah, I never had a problem with that. They do have the benefit of like HD screens and 4K screens, which they didn't have back when Mega Man 8 came
Also,
out.
it's the first 16:9 Mega Man side scroller.
Yeah, it's not only is it that, it's also zoomed out a little bit more, which maybe is part of due to the fact that it's like a widescreen game, but
Yeah.
you see much more of the play field, which is nice actually.
Yeah, the thing that is fascinating and trying to figure out how they're messaging this was really fun, of just the idea that they're like, hey, this isn't he even said, quote, like, this isn't a trial balloon. Like, this is a true resurrection of Mega Man. We want him to be back in a big way. I asked like if it kind of tied into the overall push because they're making that TV show. They're making a film. In theory, a film's in the works from the Catfish directors.
Live action?
Remember there was going to be
unclear.
a Lost Planet movie?
Oh, exactly. Look,
Yeah.
this is probably going to fall through. You never know. But
Remember
he said
they were
like,
making an Assassin's Creed movie?
Oh, yeah,
never
that never
happened?
came out.
Yeah,
I think
it's
everyone
unfortunate.
collectively forgot about it.
but they said like absolutely as part of the overall initiative of like a huge revival of Mega Man. And it's interesting. I would not call Mega Man 11 a budget game, but it seems very classic. Like it seems like from what we could gather, like the same scope of an old Mega Man game, very much that style.
Right.
And so it's interesting to have a game that's like, oh no, Mega Man's back, it's here to stay. But it's also not like they're pouring $100 million into
It's
this
not, it's not a
thing.
60-hour open world game, basically.
Right. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's a fine line, but it's an interesting way to get out of the gate, an interesting thing to message.
Well, we did ask about price. Is it's going to be a $60 product? And they wouldn't say.
They said it
Yet.
wasn't going to be physical release, though.
They did say it's going to be in a physical release.
Yeah.
So I don't. Yeah, it's interesting because you usually don't put something out in a physical release that's less than $60 because it's seen as like an inferior product if it's not.
I think it's very smart of them to do it if it is less than $60, which I would hope that it is.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there are plenty of $40 physical releases and stuff too. But anyway.
I mean,
Well,
yeah,
I'm not
Lost
saying
Legacy is something
there
recently,
are,
but-
but usually those are seen as budget games, right? There's kind of that perception around it. I
Yeah,
think people would
it's
totally
going
pay
away.
$40 for this game, and I think if they nail it, it'll be worth $40 or more, maybe even.
Yeah, who
But,
knows, though?
but we're not ready to speak on that, obviously, yet. But it's just interesting. Like they're kind of still thinking through, like, what's the price going to be? Is a game like this in this old Mega Man style robust enough? Is there enough meat on that to justify a big retail box release? I don't know. That's kind of still a question mark.
Yeah, definitely. So the game comes out in 2018, but
Late
if you-
2018, I think.
Late 2018. But if you go to GameInformer.com/Mega Man, we have a whole month of features rolling out with a lot of fun stuff. Some fun and silly stuff in there, right, Reeves?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching this excerpt from the Game Informer Show podcast. You can subscribe to the audio version and listen to new episodes airing every Thursday. We cover big games on the horizon, games that we've just reviewed. We have long-form developer interviews, a lot of fun stuff. So check it out every Thursday.